we haven't met yet. So there was this chat in the discussions room about GitOps, and I asked something last week about folder structures and tooling for it. And apparently I implemented something, and when I looked at the release manager source code, it was very similar of what I did. And also there was a few things on the internet, like the Google Application Manager, which also just defines a folder structure. There's also like a CLI app, CTL, and I guess does similar things of what we all do. So I was just wondering whether can we just agree on a folder structure and maybe have some basic tooling implemented, or just some conventions put on paper, and then maybe that will benefit other people as well. So that was, I think, my motivation for this meeting. And maybe you can go through each of us and just tell what you guys think and what your motivation of being here.
Yeah, sure. So if I'll go ahead, I'm from Lunar, Björn, and we're the authors of the release manager, as Laszlo just mentioned. So we have quite a fair understanding of that part of the discussion, and have us also quite a lot of opinions on why we chose to structure it like we did. Yeah. Well, anything else?
And I guess I was part of the initial discussion as well, mostly because Laszlo, I think you said you were asking about standardized GitOps, and if there is any. And from my experience, there was an instant no, except you said you implemented something and then looked at release manager and figured out it does basically the same. And my approach so far was the opposite, to just go straight to the release manager source code. And I also talked with Casper a bit on Slack to figure out some of the details on how they are doing things. And yeah, we are nowhere near production right now, but we're trying to kind of ease the transition to Kubernetes in general, and this really helps actually. So we're doing kind of a simpler setup, but I guess I can share that later on. But yeah, I'm just kind of interested in what the challenges were and what's the different ways of doing this, and also what potentially your tool Laszlo is going to do in the future.
Cool. Should I say something? So I can go next. So yeah, I have a couple of things on the agenda here for this meeting as well. I'm testing out some stuff. That's also why it says live up in the corner. But I also, as I'm working with Björn on the release manager, so I have some insights in that as well. But I will let Björn talk about all of the stuff that we do at Lunar, and I'm mostly here just to be a host and test out the new stuff that we are see if it works. So if you're wondering, we are right now live streaming this to YouTube, but it's not publicly shared or anything like that. It's just for testing and figuring out how this works.
I guess I can go. Are we still doing that? Sorry, I'm like the background. I'm in the office. Yeah, so all of you have been like praising GitOps for the last many months, and we finally took the plunge like a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. We have some stuff going into production now, and it has been a mess. So I decided to try it, and we've been doing it for 3 weeks, and now I just want to like bounce off ideas, listen to what you guys are saying. Yeah.
Just wanted to apologize for me running around here. We got a kid just woke up from his nap, so I might be going in and out of the discussion just until my wife can take care of him.
It's okay.
Bring him.
Oh, he's right here. You'll hear him just in a short minute, I'm sure.
Chris, you want to say something maybe? Or...
Hi. Hi everyone. I am here just to hang out. I had a family emergency, and so it's, what time is it? It's 4 o'clock in the morning here in the United States, and I was awake, and I never get to make the Cloud Native Nordics calls, and I desperately miss being able to see friends over in Europe. I haven't been able to travel, so I figured I would just come and hang out and see what folks are up to.
That's cool. You're very welcome to be here. And wow, 4 o'clock. It's early. All right, and there's we just we kicked off about our motivations why we are here. Maybe if you want to say something like what you would like to get out of this meeting, you can say it now, or you can just hang around.
Yeah, well, I'll go ahead. I was one of the ones who actually thought this would be super awesome to get some. It's more hands-on. We're currently looking into quite a lot of challenges with our release manager setup and running GitOps the way we do, due to everything in Git is quite slow, to be honest. And our motivations here are definitely to get some insights into how we can maybe do something more clever than we do currently with the release manager to both get some better performance out of the applications and get a better developer experience, definitely, because everything is quite slow at the moment. We're running a GitOps repository with plus 40,000 commits, I think. So just doing a clone operation there is getting tedious, and pushing new commits in busy hours is quite challenging due to Git's synchronization logic. So that's one of my hopes here is to get some insights into what you do to maybe get past this, or at least get some ideas into how we can move forward in a better way. We got some ideas, but I'd love to hear what you have.
So I'm nowhere near 40,000 commits. I used the go-git implementation in native Go, and so far no performance issues, although I saw Jepp's face, and I think we have went through this some beer time that it could be slow. I have other problems with go-git right now. Whenever I need to debug something, I just waste time. I could just shell out to Git, and I just know my commands, and life is simpler. So I just want to ask whether you use this go-git thing, or you do a native Git.
Yeah, we started out with go-git as well, and quite quickly when we rounded 10,000 commits, I think we ran into quite a lot of issues. It's not that memory optimized, to be honest. So putting a 10,000 commit repository into memory is heavy on even for Go, and that hurt us quite a lot. So actually, I think it's maybe 6 months, 8 months ago, we fleshed out all the go-git, mostly the go-git part of the application, and just shell out to Git, native Git. That helped us quite a lot, and as you said, it made a lot of things quite simple. Instead of having to fiddle around with Go code and loops and traversing history like that, you could just use git log as you're used to, etc. So from a readability concern and maintainability, it's way easier to just use native Git. It has the downside, of course, to adding a runtime dependency on Git, but as we run everything in Docker images, we're in control of that as well. So it's not really that much of a concern to us.
So you mentioned 40,000 commits, and Git was made for Linux, and a million commits and so on. So do you know which part is slow? I mean, maybe you can do a shallow checkout or something like that, I guess.
It's most of it. And slow in these terms, it's not like it takes a minute to do anything, not at all. But from a developer perspective, say I want to do a release, I'm not sure if everybody here is that familiar with the flow of Release Manager, but every developer has access to a CLI called ham control, and that is responsible for instructing the Release Manager to do its operations, say release some artifact to some environment and so forth. And it's basically instructing the Release Manager to just copy files from A to B. Simple operations, to be honest. That shouldn't be hard to do. So what we found out is just causing like 10 seconds here to clone the repository, just start from scratch every time, clone the repository, check out some commit, and copy the files into another cloned repository to make things work simple. Just those second operations is adding up to hit a bad developer experience. At some point, we were hitting 45 seconds to do a release, and that's from the developer's perspective. And that's just, in practice, it's not great for anybody. And worst of all, you would oftentimes find out that somebody got ahead of you. And even though we got retries, the git log synchronization would just reject your release, and then you have to go 45 seconds again. We made some quite a lot of things to make this simpler, but in general, it's just the nature of the operations we do. One important part of this is that we store every artifact. That's the term we use in Release Manager. So it's a bundle of the specification along with the resource YAML configuration stuff. Has references a Docker image lying somewhere else in that Docker registry. So these artifacts are stored in Git as well, and that's the main cause of the 40,000 commits. It's every single build in the CI system will produce such an artifact for every single branch, and with a happy developers producing a lot of code that turns out to be an insane amount of data. It's not really that much data, but it's quite a lot of operations in the Git repository, and that's just slowing everything down. So it's mostly the nature of Git and the synchronization logic there that just forces only a single operation to be active at a time. So say a single Git push, and everybody who's working in the meantime on a now stale branch would have to do a Git pull and get up to speed before they can push, and that's slowing quite a lot of things down.
These are very tough concerns. I mean, we could go into like implementation details and talk about caching and whatnot, and we can go through all this. I'm just interested whether you think that this approach is valid, so you will be able to overcome this situation, or you are a little bit losing hope.
We're actually in the middle of just fleshing out all the artifact storage from Git. It was a great idea at start, but we hadn't anticipated this amount of complications at all. So currently we're moving all artifact storage into an S3 bucket instead. So that will help in the busy hours of the CI jobs to push artifacts to just a blob storage somewhere, avoiding these locking mechanisms in Git. And what we hope to achieve with this is to reduce the load on the configuration repository, and thus also increase performance by not having to do these push, fail, pull, and push again operations. We see them quite a lot. So I think that's one of the main things we did a couple of months ago. I think we did. We took some time out to make things asynchronous instead, just to help with this bad developer experience. So now we take around 10 seconds to validate your request to do a release, and we publish an event to RabbitMQ. And then we got a consumer in the Release Manager just picking off these events one by one. That helped a lot from the developer perspective. We don't get more throughput and releases, but at least now we can just notify the developer that we recorded your intent and we'll get back to you whenever we're done processing this. That helped quite a lot. just to make things better. But it's all just I think bandages on the initial architecture of this, and trying to move everything into Git, which is not made for this kind of operations. As you said, it's made for Linux and source control, and not as a moving storage mechanism, I think. So that's, I think, our main concerns is just to try to put as little activity into the configuration repo as possible, just to make it simpler. And also one of the goals of GitOps in the first place was to get a nice and readable audit trail of what is going on. And with let's say one release out of 10, 15, 25 artifact pushes, that's just it's just way much nice. So hopefully we can move forward with these new storage mechanisms to maybe get a bit better performance into things.
So have you actually tried, or do you have some ratio of what's the artifacts contribution in this slowdown versus the actual releases? Do you think it's going to be fine if you don't have artifacts there anymore?
We hope so, yeah. At the moment, with the asynchronous flow, it helped a lot. And as I said, I think our 99th percentile of response rates is response request durations is around 10 seconds of an operation from a developer's perspective. That is validating things. That part is going to be sped up quite a lot with S3 storage, because it's mainly a validation of, is this artifact actually, does it exist? And not having to do a clone of this repository, that helps a lot just to answer that question. So hopefully we can get that, but the major point right now is CI. As CI tries to push these artifacts with Git to the repository in every build, or let's say we got 10 or 15 concurrent builds in Jenkins, and everybody ends up trying to push its artifact at the same time. It'll just stand and tripping over each other, getting one done at a time, and all the rest is just doing the Git pull and then Git push again, and hoping within the configured retry mechanisms that they all get ahead. And that slows, from a developer's perspective, everything down. Say a build that usually takes 3 or 4 minutes to complete and get done, would then take an additional, I don't know, 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes to actually just push the artifact. So it's what we're trying to aim for right now, to reduce that congestion in the CI pipeline, hopefully. And then again, doing a major rebase of the cluster config repository, removing all the artifact stuff is going to be interesting to see if it actually affects anything, or it's just a bad thesis we made up and didn't validate. But time will show. Time will show.
So just to get an idea of the commit counts, you said that you have like 20 builds running in parallel. Let's say they finish every 5 minutes. So in like an hour, that's like 200 commits or something. Or
yeah, we don't got 25 all day, every day, not at all. But I think actually, while I'm talking, I can see Casper is starting to look other places on the screen. So hopefully he got a number for us just in a minute. But I think it's around noon where everybody gets back from lunch and just reviewing pull requests and merging and just pushing their stuff and so forth. We got some congestion points during the work hours that is quite heavy. But just at a glance here, I'm just looking at the GitHub history. Yeah, I can actually just give it a share, I think. If you want to see how it is, just to get a feeling of it, because I don't got the exact numbers. Let's see.
Okay. No, so it's just like a generic volume.
Yeah. All right. I think we got around, what is it? Just give me a second. I'll
all right.
See. I can get the numbers for the releases at least, just to get an idea of what we're looking into. Here we are. No, that's not the one. Wrong Grafana dashboard. Release stats. Here we are. So during the last 7 days, we had 484 releases. That's a daily average around 67 releases a day into each environment. So when looking at those numbers, the release rate is quite low. That shouldn't be any problem with congestion in Git. Maybe it's, let's see, everybody merges the PR afternoon. Yeah, all right. It's gonna do some congestion there, but it's fairly distributed. I think so. So that's all right. The ratio of artifacts, Casper, hopefully he can extract something, but it's some Git operations, so I'm actually not sure.
I'm trying.
You're trying. All right. Fair enough.
So I think you must have tried some like basic optimizations, like when you check out, you just check out the last 200 commits or something to get like a guarantee of speed. I don't really have the overview of your system, and I don't know whether this is specific to your implementation or GitOps in general. So what do you think?
Yeah, we did some optimizations, definitely. Doing an actual Git clone is heavy. It's definitely when you're not doing anything shallow. So that's hard. What we do there is actually we just synchronize a single master. We call it. It's like a golden repository. It's in the release manager. It's always up to date by webhooks from GitHub. And every time an operation needs the master, a copy of the master repository, you just actually shell out and copy the directory directly. So we'll just copy everything into a new directory and use that as a starting point for any Git operations. That helped quite a lot. And then regarding shallow clones, with this approach, we didn't really need this because the initial Git clone is at startup, and we can use 25 seconds to clone everything and then just copy things, and it takes around 4 or 5 seconds to copy the directory as it is right now. So hopefully it's working quite well for us so far, that part of it. And then again, we are going to reduce most of the Git operations with this blob storage implementation instead. So every time you need to find an artifact or say release the latest artifact from the master branch to this environment, we can do the initial lookup quite easy with the blob storage instead of traversing the Git history. That should help with these things, hopefully, at least. But yeah, it's quite specific to how we do it in the release manager, and it's a quite complicated system, to be honest, to looking at it to just copy some files back and forth. So I'd love to hear how you got about this and whether or not you had some concerns that you thought about, or a simpler solution that made sense in your use cases.
So I just heard about the performance issues, and I heard about GoGit being a bottleneck at some point. Right now, I just came up with a folder structure. It's just, releases / environment / application name. So that's pretty naive, but this is what I'm doing. I have a different architecture compared to yours, because you have the ham control, which is doing these operations. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's just instructing. So it's just
okay,
CLI
yeah.
hitting the APIs of the release manager.
Okay, yeah. So it's the same then. So on server side, I'm doing these operations. I don't have a CLI like ham control. I have a UI right now, but a CLI is inevitable, I think. So that's needed. So maybe there is like an on-demand deploy, like somebody wants to deploy this application to that environment, and then the GitOps engine needs to do something, copy files, templating a little bit, and then put the YAMLs into the right place. Right now, I am doing everything on the fly, so no caching, nothing. I'm doing a shallow clone of 1 or 10 or something like, or 100, so it's very, very shallow. And I'm just pushing a new commit. So that's just a naive implementation. So nothing fancy going on there. And the same happens if there is a CI job is done. There is some triggering mechanism which also may trigger the GitOps engine or my GitOps engine, which just updates files in folders and pushes to Git. So I'm a little bit surprised about the challenges you have, but I'm also like very interested because I'm going to hit those as well. So I could go into details if you're interested about certain parts. But right now, I don't know really what to say because, as you said, from the outside, it's a rather simple problem. You know, there are folders, you put files in them, and then you push to Git. And this is how it gets started. And then obviously at a later point, like where you are, it could look different. I also have like an artifact YAML. I looked at yours. Yours is very complete, you know, CI information, all the things. Right now, I'm just, I'm not a very good modeler, or I'm not very good at modeling and anticipating the future. So I just put there the fields that I need right now, and then later on I extend. So one of my motivations as well with these discussions is for me to just structure my thinking and maybe be more deliberate with my artifact YAML, which I just call it a meta information about the release. So maybe just putting down what is required in that file for me as well. It's very useful. Also, I think this folder structure is really comes down to a lot of bike shedding because it's just folders and applications and environments. But maybe supporting the same as others is helpful. And you can definitely have follow-up questions about the technical parts. I just want to say that I liked Valer's intro, that he looked at Release Manager and then he just tried to apply it at his company, which is great. I believe the only concern right now for me is with the Release Manager. I don't know what's your plans with it. I think on the GitHub page it says that this is here for reference and not for open source maintenance. And also maybe the scope is larger than just this core component. So if you can talk about that, your plans, and whether you want to spin off some parts or just make some parts more confined and packaged, whether you have such plans, that would be cool to know.
If I can add something. So just to add the number, I found the number. It's the number of commits. It's on average around 250 commits a day in that area. Monday we had 314 commits on that repo. So it's in 200 to 400 commits probably a day. And also just to add a little bit to the sort of the history of why we actually ended up here and how we sort of got here, because when we looked at GitOps like, what is it, almost one and a half year ago or something like that, there's a lot of talk about we should need to put everything in Git, but the problem was it was basically just put stuff in Git and then have Flux reconcile or kube apply or whatever the other project was called at that time, apply this stuff. But the thing about moving or having multiple environments were something that was only provided by Weave Cloud at that point in the UI, the cloud solution thing they had, and that really didn't sort of fit into where we wanted to go, and that's why we started to build something ourselves. And I also wrote this in the blog post that I did around folder structure, because there's a lot of or repo structure in general. How do you actually do this? You could do it using branching, or you could do it multiple repos. You can do as we do with only having a directory for each environment, which for us at that time was the simplest thing to do. It was basically just put some stuff into the artifacts folder. Whenever somebody interacted, copy that stuff and move it into the right environment folder, and just have Flux listen for that folder. And that was basically it. That was sort of how it got started. And yeah, then we had a lot of issues, as Björn also talked about. And from the beginning, we wanted this to be a public project, not necessarily an open source project, because it takes time to run an open source project. So we just put it out there for reference, because we saw that there was a sort of this gap in the community at that point. So if anybody else were sort of interested in this kind of thing, they could look at our project and maybe help us rewrite it into a real open source project or build something from the experiences that we had. And I think we are still there. We talk sometimes about it would be awesome if we could migrate this into a real open source project, but and yeah, we just haven't had the time. And it's right now I think there's two elements of the project that are sort of tightly coupled to Luna, which is email, which is hard coded to Luna emails. It's just a string in there. It could be a configuration variable, and the environment. So how we have this promotion flow between environments, or the sort of the how environments are sort of coupled together is sort of an internal thing as well. But I think sort of if you look aside those two things, you could probably fairly easy could rewrite this into a more generic tool that you can use everywhere. But we also again have a lot of different components in that project itself. We have a component called Artifact, which we run inside of the Jenkins pipeline, which we need in order for the release manager to work, because we have some stuff in there we look up. Also, the release daemon, which is sort of a controller running in each cluster, reporting back to the release manager, is also something that you need. So you need the sort of the entire package in order for this to work, and that's maybe a lot of components to run. We also integrate directly with Flux now in the release daemon, so that's just a lot of moving parts that you need to set up. So it's not that easy to actually just adopt as it is right now.
Can I just latch on to this one, because I definitely see the 4 components, and I have similar components, you know, the daemon, something that, but on the other hand, so Google, so you started this a year and a half ago, and right now I see some activity, like Google coming out with this application manager. The other day they were showing off some config sync project, which is, I don't know what's the relation between the two, but it's doing the same stuff, I think. So I think there is some activity on this part. So something is going to so people need this by now. And the reason I stopped you right there is because Google's application control compared to our feature set is just a very shallow thing. All they do is just bootstrapping some folders, like mkdir releases application name. So it's just a very single purpose component. So I think if we could either like slice up the release manager project and just take one which is managing the application manifest, copying back and forth, and the Git logic could be another thing, which is the daemon, could be the CLI. But I'm mostly interested about the mongling of YAML in the Git repo. That's the centerpiece right now. What I was initially talking about, but I definitely understand that you have more components.
Yeah, and I think it would be great if we could somehow flesh out that section. To be honest, it's the boring part. To be honest, it is just copy and make your commands. So if we can, if there was a standard way to structure these things, it would be super easy to just extract this into an interface that also we could provide different providers for it. So you could put different storage backends, but also you could define these things as and reuse them on top of the different abstractions. That would definitely make good sense. I think the most challenging part is always to get a standard that really fits everybody's needs. The simplest approach, and that a Flux is defined as well, is just to say here's a directory, and reconcile everything in it recursively. That's it. And then you could put everything just flat down into that directory, and it'll work the same. It's a matter of how you're going to manipulate everything. That's the hard part. And I think that's why it wasn't that obvious to really reason about it when we started out, because how is the interaction going to be? And we started out with hand control and these release and promote commands that we use to really mimic how our developers are using this. So for us, it was a matter of, all right, developers are going to do these things. They're going to release a specific artifact or the latest from a branch or something like that into some specific environment. And we needed to evaluate how can we structure things to make it easy to execute those commands. From there to being a general approach, because the developer way of doing this is quite different. Casper had a great talk about it. I think it's linked in the notes as well, about how we do GitOps and Lunar and the different approaches of saying the directions of information. So we're always pushing everything into Git and let Flux reconcile that. There's never an interaction the other way. And most people, I think, in using Flux will use it the other way around. That's the main thing of Flux, to just be able to use Flux CTL to manipulate or at least decide what to do.
But is that really true? Maybe it's just our echo chamber.
Yeah.
But whoever I ask, and nobody is really using the Flux CTL and all those, or at least I don't know anyone. I don't know many people either.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just we echoing back the same stuff. But I don't use Flux CTL, and I never intended to.
Interesting.
Same, yeah, it was the same here. So we talked a lot with WeWorks in the beginning, and sort of raised this concern that we only wanted what we call a one-way flow. So just having stuff in Git and have Flux reconcile whatever is in there, and that be the proof, instead of having Flux committing back to the config repo. Of course, now that we are where we are, it gives some other problems if you want to adopt something like Flagger and stuff like that, because now you need to figure out how to actually, if you want to do a canary release or something and you want to roll that back, how is that being committed back into the config repo, because it used to go in there, because this is the new state of the cluster. So I think when WeWorks were doing this, they probably had this thing around Flagger and this concern in mind as well, and it works quite well for them, I guess, but we just didn't want that. We wanted to control whoever could commit into our config repo, and then now if we want to do this Flagger stuff, we need to figure out how to actually to do this and implement that or integrate with it somehow. But yeah, they were pretty much just promoting the two-way flow at that point, and yeah, and that's also one thing that actually made us also rewrite this or do this ourselves was we didn't want that. We want control over the flow.
And you said something that maybe they were smart, or maybe they have thought of this, because I was trying not to use the auto release flow from Flux based on tags or the semantic versions of tags, but I kind of and I made my own tooling, and right now I sort of implemented something quite similar to their auto release feature. So these, and I think you also have policies in the release manager, and if you would add the semantic versioning part into policies, then you are right there where Flux is, sort of. So maybe they are smarter or have thought of these features.
Yeah, I think the problem, or where the problem comes, if you want something like Flagger running in there, having stuff in the cluster and have two versions running at the same time, 5% is on the new version, and something goes wrong, we need a way to sort of communicate back to the release manager in our case that this is now being rolled back and you need to commit that into the repo. With Flux and Flagger, it will happen out automatically because that's part of the flow, because Flagger rolls back the version that is having an error or something, and then Flux will commit that change in the deployment back to the repo. So it's very.
But is that Flux CTL or the Flux daemon that this does doing that?
That's the daemon.
But then you can have the same flow, don't you?
Yeah, we could if we wanted to, I guess. We got the daemon inside the cluster, so we got the information and are able to react. Sure thing. I think it's Argo CD does much of the same as Flux in this matter. It's also something from outside that changes stuff, and it's actually, it sounds a bit like yours, Laszlo, regarding the UI, where you just say want to deploy this, and it'll just, the only difference I see it is this is running centrally across clusters and just pushes these information out into the clusters. But I think the odd thing around all these initiatives and Google's launch, I think it was yesterday as well, it's just it's all great at day one. Just it's so simple. Just put the YAML here, and then all these concerns get on top of it. And I'm having a hard time fitting auto releases and auto rollbacks into our setup, because it's quite static. And further, when you're a regulated company like we are in the financial industry, having something in the cluster decide to roll something back automatically, that and who authorized that rollback mechanism? Say I'm releasing this and I'm expecting errors, and then suddenly it's rolled back. Even worse, let's say I'm releasing this hotfix and something is failing, but this hotfix is more important and it fixes some part of it. Then something will roll this back, and suddenly I got a leak of, let's say, money is flowing out the back door because this hotfix isn't out there. Who's responsible for that mechanism? If I didn't sign off and the person releasing this didn't sign off to roll it back, how is that even possible? So there's some concerns there that I don't see quite fitting this automatically thing. But then again, I guess we got the same for the auto release policies, to be honest. Saying whenever you do a new commit to master, it'll be automatically released to production. But then again, you got a review just prior to releasing this. So I don't know. It's just, it feels odd somewhere to have this thing running. But the value proposition of releasing things darkly and just canary releasing something is a great proposition, I guess. I'm having a hard time to actually see this in a GitOps fashion. If it was not the way Flagger and Flux does it, just to be in control and keep everything in the cluster, and then just let that one commit back.
Yeah. I hear two things. One is that you are not comfortable with the auto releases, which is more like a workflow-y thing.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And then, so I was just listening to Twitter chatter, and even though with GitOps should capture the desired state of the cluster, and with Flagger having a longer timeline to roll that out and potentially fail it or something. So they just look at that as like the converging process, which could span in time. But I'm also not at Flagger yet, because it introduces many questions that I don't want to answer just yet. So we have like 16 minutes of this meeting. I don't know what other things you guys want to talk about.
I just wanted to say that kind of seems like this whole discussion seems to confirm my frustrations from the beginning as well, because it's a really nice idea with the Git sync and everything, but so our environment before and still now, all the parts that are not being moved to Kubernetes and so on, is just we have a Jenkins cluster, and then we have our own, like, not our own, but a separate deployment release management tool. It's called Octopus Deploy, if you've heard of it. We have a very .NET Windows background, so that's also a challenge sometimes to get people to use CLI tools. But yeah, so you get this idea of syncing Git repositories, and then as soon as you try to fit it into your already established promotion flows and environments and so on, it basically crumbles, and I didn't really know how to do it. And that's why, so we also started just thinking about doing just our own release management system around GitOps, but we just haven't got there, and I don't know if we want to or if we'll have the resources to. And so right now what we are doing is kind of semi GitOps, I guess, where we are leveraging the Flux sync for the actual delivery of the manifests and stuff like that. And we have the same structure with just like test, staging, production, and so on. But we are still using the Octopus, the release manager, which is pretty good at handling the artifacts and promotions, etc. And then we just have a custom tool that does all the Git operations, and we also generate manifests in there. So we actually we don't keep the 100% of everything like you do in the service repos of developers. Like, for example, if we want to do change a deployment level configuration variable, that doesn't need to go through CI anymore. It just goes through CD and stuff like that. But that also, it's a sacrifice that we don't keep it together with the same code sometimes. But yeah, it would be nice to just have something more flexible. And I think the idea of release manager being separated into multiple packages is kind of necessary as well, because yeah, people have different environments and move the test production flow around very differently. But yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's just it's also frustrating to see that those Google initiatives are, first of all, proprietary, and second of all, it's also seems very simplistic to even like get inspired by. So, but that's kind of a cloud thing. Yeah.
But this is the time. I think we are all figuring this out, and
yeah,
we could even potentially be more people on this topic than at Google. So
yeah, true.
Yeah, I think I'm having hard feelings around it as well, because just making the release manager do all these things, and as you use Octopus deployers, it's a battle tested technology for doing all these release engineering disciplines, and just having to reinvent the wheel around GitOps to do this, it feels odd. It shouldn't. It feels like a pain, instead of just say you could take Octopus deployer and put a GitOps repository as the backing storage for that application, because that's really what we want. We want the same flexibility and use the tools that every company has used throughout the years to do clever release engineering, and then just put a GitOps repository as the storage mechanism for it. But what we start the other way around. We're talking about the directory structure and the repository, and then just trying to build some tooling on top of it. And I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it, but it feels like we're just once again reinventing quite a lot of things that's release engineering has been around for, I don't know, quite a lot of time, and you always got manifests to define what's going on in some way, or in memory, on files, or in paper documents, I guess. So it would be so great if we can just use some of the existing release tools and just get the GitOps mechanisms on top of that, instead of having to do all these things. But it feels like a paradox in some way, because the notion around GitOps is so locked down to statically defining what's going on at every single point in time, and that just doesn't fit any dynamic release mechanisms, except if you accept the notion of doing a release can span weeks. Saying rolling out a new service for Uber across the whole world is not going to be done with a Kubernetes YAML manifest change and everything changes at the same time. It's going to be rolled out incrementally over a lot of time. And then does the GitOps idea really hold here? Does it make sense to say anytime we can look at any timestamp, look at the config repository and say what was running in our cluster at that time? But if you introduce these delayed mechanisms, do you really get the answer you expect? Or is it, yeah, it is supposed to run this, but depending on how far the rollout was, we might be running 50% of the old version still.
But I think it's true even today without Flagger and progressive rollout, because it's just a reconciliation loop. So
yeah,
there will be 10 seconds differences here and there.
Yeah, and we see that quite a lot. Everybody's just, it's in the config repo, why is it not running yet? Or if you're running quite a lot of replicas in a rolling deployment, taking one each at a time, it can take minutes before everything is synced up. So yeah, I guess it's just the nature of it. Just yeah, I'm having it feels hard to fit everything into the same concept, I guess.
But I guess that's only matters when you debug stuff, or then you could have like the version attached to the logs or something.
Yeah.
I haven't looked much into Flagger and how does that interact with Flux, but yeah, it just doesn't seem like the right place to do it to me. But like for us, the main value of this was to have like the cluster state Git repo is essentially like a distilled sort of human readable version of etcd that's not polluted by all the controllers and so on. And as soon as you start introducing that, we also don't do the auto release and the image tag patching and so on, because that's already something polluting our things that we put there. Like we might have automated it, but it's still kind of human defined, and it's only the minimum human defined in the files. So yeah, I don't see how Flagger really does it or is supposed to do it, but I'll have a look. Maybe they're.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just maybe they're smarter than me about this probably, since they're doing it.
I think leaving Flagger out of the discussion is just a good favor for everyone, because it explodes everything. But I'm hearing something. One is Octopus deploy. I would love to see that in action, like how you guys use it, because I've never seen it. I guess it's like Spinnaker or something.
Sorry, I was unmuting and that kind of overshadowed all of what you were saying.
So I would love to see Octopus deploy. If you have some time at some point, I would definitely.
Yeah, sure. I think you might be able to get the general idea from their docs as well, but okay. I can show something. I don't know. We're an energy trading company, so I'll have to check.
No. So don't need to share screen if it's a problem.
Yeah.
You also said that you use that as like driving your workflow, and there is this little component that does the GitOps backend file manipulations, right?
Yeah. We basically just wrote like a CLI to not even in Go actually. It's just in C# because that's the company language. Mm-hmm. We just wrote a tool and it's very, very early stages. We're basically using it to just deploy very simple stuff as we're setting up our cluster. Yeah, it's just basically cloning, doing some temp directories and moving things. And we don't have this whole artifacts part of our repo basically, because we just have the data we need in Octopus. And then we use that to generate the manifests and put them in one of the environments folders.
I actually realized that I also don't have artifacts in your sense, meaning that you prepare for every build an artifact that can be moved to an environment on demand, because I'm only doing stuff if we are moving into an environment. So that's
I think that's what Release Manager does, right? It has a bunch of artifacts and then the release is just moving from a folder to a folder, right?
Yes, exactly. And every environment must be pre-configured to be releasable at the time of the build. So let's say I haven't prepared a build for production in my service. I can never release any artifacts to production from that specific commit in the service because there is no resources defined for it. It's a way of limiting. It's both a way of limiting what can be thrown out to production, saying if I reviewed some code and there wasn't a production configuration set up in the service, I can maybe go a bit easier on the review part, but I can't because I'm sure it can never hit production. And also it's a means of avoiding any templating at release time. saying I see some people are using the Helm operator as well to use with Flux and let Flux do the actually Helm templating and value passing. And we don't really like that, because we'd like to go into the GitOps repository and see what's really what Vala just told. It's just an human readable etcd data storage. So it works really well to just see what was the actual change of this particular release. It was only the deployment image and nothing else. All right, so it's easier to reason about, instead of it's being some value that's passed by maybe another template from the last release, but who knows. So yeah, we prepare everything up front.
And also one of the reasons for actually doing this is also to move away a lot of the YAML stuff from our developers, so we don't have them, tinkering with YAML files, because we abstract a lot of the stuff away from them, and just sort of centralize that, and we've built same defaults for how you deploy your services. So that's also one of the reasons why it's in that way set up, because we want it to be as easy for the developers to get their stuff out there. They don't have to think about Kubernetes stuff and all of that. They can just build a service, we have another open source tool that we built, Shuttle, in their service, and it will sort of fetch things from a central repo and generate Kubernetes YAML based on that.
And that's similar from the developer babysitting point of view. That's basically what we want as well, and what we are doing even for legacy stuff as well. That a lot of the complexity is just in those like CI/CD steps and so on. The only difference is that for, as I mentioned, the whole .NET Windows stereotype, for now we don't want to move the actual configuration to be in like a YAML file in the service repos and so on, because we're not sure what the adoption would be. I would probably prefer that, but normally all the like release variables are in the release system, and you either do it with usually people just do it with GUI, but it has like auditing and stuff like that, so it's not so bad. But I would probably not use it if I had to like start a team from scratch or something. So yeah.
Actually, I think that's quite an important point to make in our decision to do it like we did, because the co-location of the configuration of an environment and the application code was quite important for us. And that's the reason we started out the journey of Shuttle and later on Release Manager, just to make sure that the developer releasing the service and developing the service, those are the same people. It's the same team that does this, and they're responsible for the same things. And we want to put that configuration up front into their own history of the service, instead of having that live somewhere else. And I think most systems are using it the other way, as you also mentioned, Bella. You put the configuration out into a separate place and just merge this and say, I want 10 of this application over here, or something like that. So it has proven to be a quite important part of the way we do things in the matter of the tooling we build around it, because it gives a lot of, to be honest, headaches to decentralize all this information. So we built Shuttle to try to centralize some of it again, but it's back and forth, and just pushing things down to the service owners to maintain Kubernetes manifests is not a way to go. We tried and failed hard. That's a tough way to do it. So we need some kind of abstraction to make it work.
And I definitely see your point. Like we have, it's the same from our point when it comes to that the same team is responsible for both the release and everything. It's just in different systems. But that is, at least to my taste, that's proving pretty difficult to scale and manage. We have like hundreds, even maybe thousands different projects in Octopus that are kind of independently deployable. Not all of them like actual services and APIs. Some of them are just like jobs, batch stuff. But the whole drift of what's a project called in Octopus and what is it called in Git and what is it actually logging its name as in Elasticsearch and stuff like that. It's for somebody like me who's in the team that does all the core services stuff and sometimes needs the overview, it's just a pain to script all of that. So that's why I'm saying that I would probably prefer to just put everything in Git if there's a doable way to get developers to do it. But yeah.
All right, I think we reached 2 o'clock. What do you think, guys? Should we continue this discussion, or it was just a nice to just air out some frustration and ideas?
Yeah, I think it would be great if we could continue it in the way of maybe looking into how we can extract some of these things from the release manager. As Casper said, we're not running this as an open source project for everyone to join, but we don't discourage engagement in the project. So if there's something like you build something and you can reuse some of the parts that we use, feel free to open an issue and let's start discussing around it. Another way we could do it is to do a specific call maybe around this with some preparation in hand, to figure out what are the operations that we need, and maybe we can establish an interface that we can move for, and then we could spend some time trying to change the code to make it better work for your use cases. We'd love this to be shared either in the release manager package or somewhere else. We don't really care if anybody can use it. It's great. So and also can help battle test some of our use cases, or maybe influence the way we do it. So if you'd like, at least I would love to continue this in some form or the other.
Yeah, me too. And I think that we have put a lot of experience into the project as it is right now. A lot of headaches has gone into the code. So I think it's fairly battle tested. So it would be nice to actually see it converge into a real open source project at some point. And as Laszlo, if you are building on top of some of the same stuff, please see if there's something you can use or we can extract, or just interact with us, because we really want to do this.
Yeah, it would be great. And further, just to clarify, Laszlo, if you use some of the same things and you can make money from it, that's awesome. So just to really encourage the use of this, it's an open source project, but it's not a business line for us at all. So anything that can make benefit for everybody else is very, very welcoming.
Thanks. And I think of this as like a very similar way, like a pragmatism. We are implementing the same stuff, so why not? And I agree that if we do something as a follow-up, there should be some asynchronous preparation round. So we come with a clear agenda, so we don't just explore things. But I was very pleased that you guys are here, and it was awesome.
I'd be happy to share opinions and stuff when you have something. I think the main thing for the release manager is to just, I think the whole artifact coupling is the toughest, at least from what I tried to look at it, if I can fork it and just use that. But I think the whole environments could be adjusted to our setup, but not to the artifact setup. So, and there's also some cool things there, like the whole error message to Slack and stuff like that, that we really liked, and we probably will have to implement it on our own. So yeah, definitely it would be nice to explore it further.
Right, but then I think it would make sense to as I mentioned in the beginning of the call, we're doing some refactorings around the artifact section of this, and hopefully what we get from that is a better pluggable storage mechanism for just defining something that can provide you with the resources that you want. And if we can get to that abstraction level, we should be able to make something that is independent of the origin of these manifests, and just maybe share the moving files around section a bit simpler, because we got a clear interface. So maybe it'll make sense to I don't know, take up a call in a month or something like that, and we can see how far we got with this. And if you have any ideas and thing, I can open an issue in the release manager, and you can share your thoughts around maybe how you provide the artifacts now, and we can work on getting this to be an interface we can use to move that, and that could be a starting point maybe to move this forward, and then we can see how we go about doing the next thing, or the other way around, of course, if you need it. But if it's the release part that's most important, we can try to spend some time extracting some of the things that make sense there, I guess.
I think that's a good final say. Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
And thanks for making the release manager public to make this possible, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
No problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
See you all.
All right. Take care.
Have a nice weekend.
See you guys.
Yeah,
See
you
ya.
too. Bye.